Mark the date. February 13th, 2026 is the specific moment the history book stopped being written and started being rewritten from the very first page. Center ice at the Milano Arena looked like a celebration zone, teddy bears raining down, thousands of people realizing simultaneously they had witnessed something that defied every boundary they believed was permanent. Ilia Malinin did not look breathless when the scores came down. He looked vindicated, like a sovereign finally ascending a throne that had been reserved for him since his teenage years. This was not a gold medal performance in the normal sense. It was a complete system shock, technically ferocious, physically unreasonable, and statistically overpowering in a way that shredded the rulebook entirely. The old ceiling of what was considered achievable at the Olympic level died the moment he struck that opening pose, and the sport that existed before February 13th does not exist in the same form anymore. 10 years of anticipation condensed into 4 minutes, and he did not need a miracle, he needed to be himself, and that turned out to be more than enough to shatter the entire competitive framework. 4 years earlier, they left him at home for Beijing, passed over in favor of safer veteran selections, despite the fact that he was already executing jumps that nobody else on the planet was seriously attempting. That dismissal fueled 1,460 days of preparation, 1,460 mornings of rising with something to prove, something to build toward, something to settle on the largest stage the sport has ever provided. He anchored Team USA to gold in the team competition alongside Madison Chalk and Evan Bates earlier in the week, but February 13th was never about the collective result. February 13th was strictly personal. The individual singles gold completed the Grand Slam, Olympic title, World Championship, and Grand Prix final all held simultaneously by a single skater. No competitor in this generation has come remotely close to assembling that combination, and he built it by surpassing Nathan Chen's technical ceiling and replicating Yuzuru Hanyu's magnetic cultural presence simultaneously. He added a difficulty multiplier to both legacies that neither legend could have envisioned attempting at the absolute peak of their respective careers, which is the sentence that defines what happened in Milan. The explanation for how he leaves every other competitor trailing in the dust is pure, cold arithmetic, and if you are his rival, it is the specific variety of math that destroys you psychologically before the music starts. Every jump carries a base value, a score you bank simply for attempting the rotation, and elite competitors like Kageyama entered the free skate with projected values sitting in the 90s. Respectable, elite, genuinely world-class technical content, and Malinin strides out starting in the hundreds, granting himself a 20-point advantage before his blade has carved a single mark into the ice surface. The Malinin buffer is a statistical firewall constructed from stacking high-value quads, including the quad axle, engineered so deliberately that he is mathematically untouchable on any ordinary competitive day. In 2026, he could stumble once, maybe twice, and as long as he lands the remainder of his content, he is still standing on the top step, collecting gold while everyone else watches in genuine disbelief. His absolute worst day is still superior to everyone else's career highlight. That is not an exaggeration or a marketing line. That is what the actual point spreadsheets show when you run the numbers honestly. He became the first human being in history to land 6 quadruple jumps in an Olympic final, including the one jump nobody else on Earth dares to earnestly attempt under any competitive conditions. The quad axle demands 4.5 rotations while airborne, requiring a torque so violent and a vertical ascent so enormous that medical professionals genuinely argued the human body could not structurally execute it cleanly. He rotates at 340 revolutions per minute on that jump, the literal velocity of a ceiling fan operating on high, except the ceiling fan is not simultaneously attempting to land on a single blade.
The moment he touched down in Milan, the dialogue about what the human body can physically accomplish shifted permanently, without any possibility of reverting to the conversation that existed before that landing happened. Every competitor witnessing it understood in real time that the discipline they had devoted their entire lives to had just advanced to a place they might not be structurally capable of following him into. That comprehension, visible on the faces of the field as the scores descended, is the specific psychological consequence of watching someone operate in a category that has no other current occupants. What genuinely unsettles the competition is not the quad count, it is the precise timing of where in the program he elects to position his most destructive and highest value technical content. Any jump executed after the midpoint of a free skate receives a 10% bonus because at that stage of competition, your legs are supposed to be completely destroyed and your lungs are supposed to be burning. Most elite competitors at the 4-minute mark are managing exhaustion, protecting their landings, fighting to survive a standard triple without a catastrophic error that ends their medal hopes in a single moment. Malinin at the 4-minute mark executes a quad Lutz triple toe combination with his heart rate peaking at 190 beats per minute. That is not elite athletic performance. That is a different category of organism entirely. His core strength allows him to maintain clean rotation even when his muscles are saturated with lactic acid, which the Japan Times accurately described as unlocking a new tier of human athletic possibility. He is not jumping, he is soaring, and the difference between jumping and soaring is the difference between competing in the same sport that everyone else is and inhabiting a version of the sport only he currently occupies.
The real revelation that emerged in Milan was not about the quads he landed, but about the jump he deliberately chose not to attempt, and what its existence alone does to everyone standing in the same competitive field. Intelligence circulating before the games indicated he had already landed a quintuple Salchow in training back home in Virginia. 5 complete rotations, a jump the entire sport had dismissed as physically impossible for decades. He opted conservatively in the Olympic final, adhering to the quad axel to secure the gold rather than wagering the most significant competitive moment of his career on a jump with zero margin for error. But the quintuple existing somewhere in his training repertoire, even unconfirmed in competition, transforms the psychological landscape for every skater who has to stand in the same field and attempt to close a gap that keeps expanding. Kageyama and Shoma Uno are processing a 4-rotation universe, while Malinin is already residing in a 5-rotation dimension, and that gap is not the kind that narrows through additional effort or dedication or natural talent development. Serious sports scientists are debating whether the human body can physically withstand a quintuple rotation. A sentence that would have registered as science fiction 5 years ago is now a genuine technical discussion in 2026. If you focused exclusively on the technical content and overlooked the cultural phenomenon occurring simultaneously on that same ice, in that same building, you missed half of what Milan actually represented for the sport. Back in his adolescent years, critics branded him a machine, too much mechanics, insufficient soul, a jumping technician who could not rival the artistic depth of legends like Hanyu in the component scores. Milan buried that narrative so thoroughly and so publicly that it cannot be resurrected by anyone who watched the free skate without deliberately choosing to ignore everything that happened from the opening pose to the final spin. He arrived on the ice for his gold medal program in a costume that belonged on a Paris runway, sleek, commanding, draped in thousands of black crystals catching the arena lights like stars moving through darkness. He brought a swagger to the ice this sport had not witnessed in decades, the specific magnetic charisma that compels people who have never watched a single figure skating competition to stop scrolling and pay full attention. He became the first skater in years to emerge as a household name among people who genuinely could not care less about figure skating, and that variety of cultural reach is worth more to the sport than any medal count can measure.
He possesses signature maneuvers in his arsenal that carry no point value, earn no bonus, and serve no competitive function beyond communicating something specific to every competitor watching from the kiss and cry area. The Biellmann twist, a horizontal aerial rotation that looks like something extracted from a science fiction production, is his method of conveying that he still has energy in reserve after executing all of that technical content. He is so far ahead on the numbers that he can afford to burn output on movements that score nothing simply to demonstrate precisely who commands the sport at this specific moment in history. That is not confidence in the normal athletic sense. That is a declaration delivered publicly before the entire watching world, simultaneously across every time zone on the planet, without requiring a single word. He has bridged the gap between mechanical precision and human magnetism in a way that figure skating has genuinely never encountered. The technical output of a system operating at full capacity inside the body of a cultural icon. The result is a sport being dragged forward into a future it was not fully prepared to inhabit, pulled there by a 21-year-old who decided the existing ceiling was simply a starting point rather than a destination. The atmosphere inside the Milano arena when the scores descended was unlike anything this sport has witnessed across its entire competitive history, spanning every era and every generation of champions who came before. It was not a victory lap, it was a coronation, the formal and public acknowledgement that a new era had commenced and that everything which preceded it now belongs to a completely separate chapter of the narrative. The era of courteous, graceful skating, performed within understood technical parameters by athletes who accepted those parameters as permanent, has concluded, and it concluded on a specific evening, at a specific arena, on a specific date. His adversary is not the competitor in the changing room, sharpening blades and reviewing program scores. His adversary is physics, and in Milan, on February 13th, physics absorbed the defeat without a coherent rebuttal available. Every competitor who stood in the same Olympic final understood the distance between themselves and the gold was not a gap of dedication or talent or preparation, but a gap of category, and categories do not close easily. He did not simply claim the event, he demonstrated that claiming the event and participating in the same event are two entirely distinct experiences when one participant has relocated the ceiling beyond where the others can reach. The legacy question surrounding what happened in Milan is not about whether he is the finest active skater. That conversation concluded the moment he first landed the quad axel in competition, years before this night. The question is where he sits in the permanent historical record alongside Chen, who defined technical dominance for one era, and Hanyu, who defined artistic transcendence for an entirely different generation of the sport. He took the defining contributions of both legends, built on top of everything they established as the outer boundary of achievable, and added a difficulty multiplier that neither of their eras had access to or could have created. The Grand Slam is the formal credential, Olympic gold, World Championship, Grand Prix final simultaneously, but the real credential is what he did to the sport's fundamental concept of its own limitations in a single 4-minute program. He proved that impossible is a word used by people who have not yet done the arithmetic, and the arithmetic he is currently executing in competition belongs to a version of this sport the rest of the field has not caught up to. He is 21 years old, he is Olympic champion, and the quintuple sitting in his training repertoire means the gap between where he is today and where he is capable of going has not yet reached its outer limit.